Part 309. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3089. Zhou Man didn't think this was a contradiction, but said to Wen Tiandong, Master Luo and I are a little more daring, but it may not be correct. You and your classmates can take a look first. If we are wrong, you will want to do it later. Take it as a reference. Wen Tiandong, what will happen if Mr. fails? Zhou Man is very confident in himself. If I fail, I will probably have all the jobs and fields taken back, but don't be afraid, even if I don't become an official, I will try my best to travel all over the world, see more diseases, and write about it in the future. From a good medical book. Wen Tiandong heard a hint of excitement in her voice, and he was not worried for a moment. He thinks that the hospital may be right. Mr. Zhou's aggressiveness may be intentional. He deliberately does not want to be an official. Wen Tiandong was depressed and prepared the prescription indoors. Zhou Man saw that he had done well and felt a little bored, so he went out first to get some air. Hu Xiaomei came over with a box of medicinal powder. Sir, this is the medicinal powder that Dr. Tian grinded. Zhou Man waved to her, twisted the powder and smelled it. After confirming that it was ground after processing, he glanced at the label on the box, nodded slightly, and waved her to the house. Hu Xiaomei was sent in, and soon came out. Just as she was about to go to the backyard to continue her work, Zhou Man stopped her and asked, What herbs have you recognized these 2 days? Hu Xiaomei was a little nervous, standing in front of Zhou Man, twisting her hands and answering stutteringly. Zhou Man nodded while listening and encouraged her, Yes, there are 3 doctors in the medical office now. If you are uncertain about the medicinal properties of the medicinal materials, you can ask me, or ask them. He added, and Wei Shizhong. He is a few years older than you. Basically, the medicinal properties of the medicinal materials have been memorized. If you have any doubts, you can ask him. Hu Xiaomei nodded again and again. She was not so nervous at this time, and couldn't help but quietly raised her head to look at Zhou Man. Sir, can I teach my elder brother what I have learned? Zhou Man smiled and said, Of course, if he can learn, it will be a way out in the future. Hu Xiaomei's eyes brightened, and she asked, The eldest brother and sister son told us to learn from us. Can they also follow us to watch Dr. Tian and the others handle the medicinal materials? Zhou Man raised his eyebrows, nodded and smiled, Of course, if they can learn it, they can also help the medical department in the future. Hu Xiaomei raised her face with a smile, squatted down and gave a salute cheerfully. She couldn't help jumping when she left, and returned to the backyard happily. Before pulling them up and letting them watch the doctors handle the medicinal materials, she said, The Lord said that the brothers should learn it as soon as possible, so that they can handle the medicinal materials for the medical office in the future. Dr. Tian frowned slightly, but still didn't say anything. Seeing Hu Xiaomei jumping away, Julan smiled and said to Zhou Man, The slave used to think she was too stupid. I'm afraid she won't be able to learn the lady's medical skills, but now she doesn't look very stupid. Zhou Man smiled and said, She is only 9 years old, and she did all the housework when she was at home, and she also took care of her mother, cooking, cleaning, sweeping, fetching water and growing vegetables. So tough, she can do well too. This is also one of the reasons why Zhou Menyi agreed to accept Hu Xiaomei at the beginning. She has a tenacious character. The 3 brothers and sisters are not living well, so they don't need to mention it. Since they have mentioned it, she will naturally help them to the best of her ability. Bundle. The weather is cold and the number of patients with wind cold is increasing. In addition to decoctions, occasionally in severe cases, or young children, Zhou Man will give them acupuncture or paste medicine. At this time, Zhou Man will let the 3 of Dr. Tian follow him. Except for the women who got acupuncture and they were inconvenient to watch, she allowed them to watch and study, and explain to them in detail. Acupuncture can dispel cold and promote yang, and moxibustion can restore yang, and both have effects on cold symptoms. However, when using acupuncture and moxibustion, you should also pay attention to some cold symptoms that are not on the surface, but may be dryness and heat on the inside. Some cold symptoms are not on the surface. Some are on the bottom, and the top is dry and hot. Different symptoms, different people, different acupuncture methods. Jo Man's mouth was dry, and she finally stabbed a patient with a needle. She turned her head and asked the three of them, "Have you written it all down?" The faces of the three were a little embarrassed. Jo Man said a lot, but they only recorded 3 or 4 points. As expected, Imperial Physician Lu was right. There is still a difference between the doctors outside and the imperial physicians in the imperial hospital. At least when she communicated with them about acupuncture in the imperial hospital, they could record 7 or 8 points every time. Some were even able to discuss it with her. Jo Man took the needles and smiled at them. "It's all right, this is just the first patient you watched today. The pulse chart will have his pulse, symptoms, and the prescriptions and needles used. You can transcribe it yourself when you go back." A review. The three of Dr. Tian were refreshed and asked, "Can we transcribe the prescriptions and needles?" Jo Man nodded. "I said I will teach you, so naturally you can transcribe it." She endured it, but she couldn't hold back. "Actually, you should carry a pen and paper with you, just a small notebook and a small pen. There should be some for sale in the bookstore. Or if you have any questions, ask me. It's best to bring a pen and paper. Good memorization is not as good as a bad pen, and you can review it slowly after writing it down. If you don't understand what you wrote down, you can ask me again. Now you only use your brain to memorize it, and you will forget what I just said in a while. How can you know if there is something you don't understand?" Dr. Tian and the others have not been students for many years, so they couldn't help but be taken aback. No, even when they were apprentices, they couldn't bring pen and paper, they could only use their brains to memorize them. Remember how much they learn and how much they have. When they were apprentices in the past, the doctors would never say the same question a second time, and some questions would not even be pointed out. Not to mention asking questions, it is not the master who served tea and worshipped, who would patiently answer your detailed questions. The three of them were a little flustered. Even Dr. Xiao, who had always been big-hearted, couldn't help but ask, "Master Zhou, are we apprentices? Are we not qualified to be your teacher?" "Jo Man, I have only accepted 4 disciples, and I don't plan to accept a 5th one yet, and the 3 of you are not very suitable for their age." Jo Man refused them as politely as possible, and she didn't like their talents. The 3 of Dr. Tian blushed. Although they were very embarrassed, they still looked at her with sparkling eyes. Master Zhou taught other apprentices like this. Jo Man thought they were dissatisfied with her teaching method, so he said, "I teach students like this. Aren't apprentices the same as students? My teaching method has been used by Xiaoyuan Zheng and Tai Hospital, all Tai hospitals, and all the students of Tai Medical Department." They agree. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3090. She said, "The last year the Imperial Physician's Office rated the most popular doctor, and I was the first, so what are your opinions on my teaching method?" Of course, she also humbly asked for advice if she had any opinions. Jo Man touched her belly and felt that she was so angry recently because she was pregnant, so she recited her words 3 times in her heart, suppressed her temper and asked them humbly. "If you have any opinions, I will try my best to correct them." The 3 middle-aged doctors shook their heads in unison, standing in front of Jo Man like 3 well-behaved students, swallowed and said, "Master Zhou taught very well, then, we will bring paper and pencil tomorrow." Jo Man stared at them earnestly, making sure that they were asking seriously and that they had nothing to say. Only then did his face calm down and he nodded, "Yes." Joe Man put the needle bag next to him and nodded to the three of them, boil the used needles, wipe them clean, put them away, and write down the prescription and pulse case. Remember to file them later. The three nodded again and watched Joe Man leave with support on his waist, and all three breathed a sigh of relief. The patient who had been lying on the bed pretending not to exist also let out a sigh, and the sound was a little louder. The three of them turned their heads to look at him together. The patient's exhaust gas was choked up, stared at them with small eyes, and asked cautiously, Can't I exhale? It's not that we can't, it's just that you suddenly came here to scare us. The patient exhaled the exhaust gas, raised his hand and wiped the sweat on his forehead and said, Master Joe was amazing just now. I was a little scared, and I held it in one breath. The three doctors nodded in agreement. They let the patients get dressed themselves. One took the needles in the needle bag to boil and wash, the other took the prescription to get the medicine, and the other counted the money. They are also familiar with this patient, Dr. Tien. He is a householder, so he has to pay not only for medicine, but also for consultation and acupuncture. Dr. Xiao said while calculating the money, Why did you come to the medical office to see a doctor? I remember that people in your house are used to asking Dr. Tien to come to the door. Patient, did Dr. Tien come to the medical office? I can't invite Dr. Tien, so I have to come to the medical office. Then why didn't you see Dr. Tien? Patient, they have all come to the medical office. Of course, they are looking for the one with the best medical skills. Why are they still looking for Dr. Tien? If Dr. Tien was still willing to go out and visit him for diagnosis and treatment, he would naturally choose Dr. Tien if he was too lazy to go out, but now he has come to the medical office. With so many choices, he naturally had to choose the best one. However, the patient didn't want to offend Dr. Tien, so he smiled politely at Dr. Xiao. Isn't this lucky? I just happened to meet Mr. Zhou. Are you free? Today, he can also see that compared to the medical skills of the three doctors, Master Zhou is not a star and a half better, but a lot better. Dr. Wei brought the medicine that he had caught, and Dr. Xiao also calculated the money from the prescription. After receiving a sum of money from the patient, they all watched him leave. It's really rare. It's rare in the medical office to have a patient who has to pay for both medicine, outpatient consultation, and even acupuncture. Dr. Xiao said, I and Dr. Tien are both here. I have a hunch that there will be more and more patients like this in the future. Dr. Tien was a little worried, when we leave in the future, won't these patients stay in the hospital? Dr. Wei said calmly, No, the medical office basically does not go out for clinics, and rich people are used to inviting doctors to come to the door. Even if the medical skills of the medical office are better, it may take time to line up when you come to the medical office. There must be a lot of people don't want to. Dr. Tien and Dr. Xiao felt a little better. The three of them were leaning on the medicine cabinet and chatting. Master Zhou said what acupuncture points are used for Xiaohan Shangar. After just starting, Wei Shizhong ran to them, Dad, Lord Zhou asked you to make medicine. The three of them sighed and went to the backyard without complaint. In the evening, Dr. Tien and Dr. Xiao left exhausted. To be honest, the medical department is really busy, much more busy than their pharmacy, especially trivial things. I don't know how Master Zhou did all these things by himself before they came. Shortly after the two left, Dr. Wei also took his son out and went directly to the bookstore. Father, what are we going to do? Buy pen and paper. Isn't there one in the medical office? It's not the kind of pen and paper you bought. You can take it with you. You also buy a set and keep it with you. If you meet the teacher last week, you have to write it down, you know. But Dad, you didn't beat me before, you were not allowed to use notes, you were only allowed to use your mind to write down, saying that only what is written down in your mind is my own. Dr. Wei said embarrassedly, this is Lord Zhou's habit. We have to follow the customs of the countryside. Since we are under Lord Zhou now, we naturally have to listen to Lord Zhou. He said this because that's what his father taught him, but after listening to a class today, he found that he could not remember much, and his memory was not as good as before, so it seemed like his father, what his grandfather said to him since he was a child may not necessarily be it's all justified, so it's good to listen to Lord Zhou's words and make some changes. Dr. Wei took his son to the bookstore, and happened to meet Dr. Xiao and Dr. Tian. The three of them met and smiled embarrassedly. Then Dr. Wei asked the shopkeeper, "Is there a pen and paper that I can carry with me?" The shopkeeper glanced at Dr. Wei curiously, and found that it was not familiar, so he couldn't help but wonder, why are there so many people buying portable paper and pens today? Yes, yes, do you want a bamboo tube for ink? Dr. Wei nodded again and again, yes, yes. It was the first time that Dr. Wei knew that there was such a pen and paper, and the shopkeeper smiled and said, "We also have a cloth bag specially for these pen and paper, which is very small and has an inner pocket, which can be placed in it and hung around the waist when not in use. Even wearing arrow sleeves does not hinder carrying around. I see that everyone's clothes are mainly smart and strong. Do you want to come with too?" Dr. Tian couldn't help but said, "One is enough. Why do you want to?" "Oh, it's easy to change and wash with one more, and the styles and patterns are different, but they still look good. It looks like this is orchid and this is bamboo. These two are the best sellers. Students in the county school love to buy these two." Kind. They are not county school students. However, the three of them were still selected. They are all adults. The breadwinners, are they the ones who can lack money? When Wei Shizhong saw that his father was very provocative, he also chose to. Dr. Wei glanced at it and was very disgusted. Just as he was about to speak, the shopkeeper said happily, "Young master has a good eye, this peony pattern and rose pattern are the best selling in our store." "Dr. Wei, didn't you just say that bluegrass and bamboo are the best sellers?" The shopkeeper's smile froze, and he said, "Those two are the best sellers among the students of the county school. The peony and the rose are also very good. Look at the color, how bright, and look at the embroidery. It's good to pick one out of 100. See you tomorrow." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 3091. Although Dr. Wei was very suspicious of the shopkeeper's words, but his son liked it, and finally Dr. Wei bought it for him. Dr. Tian and Dr. Xiao also picked out their favorite cloth bags and checked out together and left. Walking out of the bookstore, the three doctors glanced at each other, and said in a fake greeting, "It's getting late." "Yeah, it seems like it's time for dinner." "Haha, yes, Zhoujing must have prepared dinner. Why don't the two doctors come home for dinner with me?" Dr. Wei was the first to refuse. "The medical department has already prepared the meals for our father and son, so it's not worth wasting." Dr. Xiao said that his wife was also waiting for him to come home for dinner, so he also refused. Everyone dispersed in front of the bookstore and went back to different places. The shopkeeper watched them leave and shook his head. Wei Shizhong couldn't help but see his father along the way. "Dr. Wei, what are you looking at?" "Father, you and Dr. Tian, Dr. Xiao are both apprentices in the medical office, so you should be considered as apprentice brothers. Why do you?" He paused and said, "Why do you look so hypocritical?" "Dr. Wei, what do children know? We are all about the same age, and our teachers are completely different. Although we are both apprentices in the medical department, a year later, when I want to go back to my own pharmacy, they will also come back. Go to their respective owners, and go in different ways. The way is different, why be too intimate?" Wei Shizhong asked with a tangled face, then, Should I and Hu Xiaomei also distance themselves from each other? Dr. Wei patted his head and said, "Fool, can you be like us? How old are we, how old are you?" He said, "You and Hu Xiaomei are both young. Even if you go home for your father in a year, you have to stay as an apprentice. You are an apprentice who studied from the very beginning, and your friendship is naturally no better than me and Dr. Tian and the others, so you get along well with people." He added, "As long as you can learn a third of Master Zhou's medical skills, even if you can't enter the medical office to make a difference in the future, it will be enough to go home and inherit your own medical office." Since Dr. Wei has brought his son into the medical office, he is naturally ambitious. He thought that his son would study with Zhou Man, and if he succeeded in his studies in a few years, it would be best to follow Zhou Man's path or take an exam to study in the imperial physician's office. Then he came out as an official too. Even if they are medical craftsmen, they still want to honor their ancestors for the official glory. If he is really bad and can't get into the imperial physician's office, but as long as he learns some medical skills from Zhou Man, if he needs to use it, he can stay in the physician's office and slowly climb up. From Dr. Wei's point of view, as long as his son can be a rank official, even a 9th rank is enough. As for the third type, that is to go back to inherit the family business when the first two have no results. Dr. Wei stretched out his hand and patted his son's shoulder and said, "Your talent is already the best among your brothers. If you can't learn it, it will be even harder for your brothers to learn and succeed. So you have to learn from Master Zhou. Don't look at the pharmacy at home that welcomes so many patients every day. In fact, our situation is not good. If we don't have good medical skills and background support in the future, we will definitely decline." Wei Shizhong said quickly, "Don't worry, Dad, I will study hard." Dr. Wei sighed and nodded. There are a total of 5 apprentices in the medical department. The 2 young ones are okay. Because of their limited knowledge, they are learning how to handle medicinal materials every day. Zhou Man was quite satisfied with them, but not so satisfied with the 3 high school apprentices. This afternoon, Zhou Man received a trauma patient. The man slipped and fell down the hillside when he was going up the mountain to gather firewood. It was delivered in a timely manner, and the person's simple bandaging eased the bleeding speed, so the person was fine when it was delivered. After the inspection, Zhou Man said, "The fracture is broken, and it needs to be sutured after the bone is connected. There are residual sawdust and some debris in the wound. It needs to be debridement. Give him a bowl of numbness to disperse it." Zhou Man didn't prescribe the prescription, because she felt that the 3 doctors must have a prescription for Ma Fi-san, but seeing that the 3 of them didn't move, she frowned slightly and called Zibing to fight, "Go grab the medicine for Ma Fi-san, let Xiao Cao boil the medicine, and you come to fight." Zibing followed Zhou Man to the battlefield, and some decoction recipes that were commonly used on the battlefield were memorized, and Ma Fei-san was naturally one of them, so she turned around and went to grab the medicine. Zhou Man turned his head to the 3 of them and said, "Dr. Tian, cut off his trousers, Dr. Xiao, go and prepare a hemostatic medicine, use 2 coins for raw nangsing and 3 coins for raw rhubarb." Zhou Man read the prescription directly, and after Dr. Xiao wrote it down, he said to Dr. Wei, "Go and prepare the surgery. The 3 of them should act independently." Zhou Man just folded his arms and watched. The cake came back soon, and said to Zhou Man, "The medicine is boiled." Zhou Man nodded slightly and asked her to prepare hot water and clean towels. Dr. Tian and Zibing had already cut off his clothes, revealing the wound. Zhou Man saw that he was still bleeding, so they gave him a needle to stop the bleeding. When everything was ready, and the person also drank Ma Fi-san, he casually took a thick needle to puncture an acupuncture point. Seeing that he didn't have much reaction, he knew that Ma Fi-san was effective. She cleaned her hands and said to the 3 people standing by her side, "Today you can see how I suture the bones, which will use hemostatic drugs, painkillers, and the corresponding acupuncture." Joe Man explained while making the cakes, while the three of them worked hard with small notebooks. But Joe Man occasionally said, and occasionally focused on the injuries of her subordinates, not to mention, her technique was above them, the amount of bleeding that broke a bone was very small, and the cleaning of the debris in the wound was fast and light. There were several times when they didn't take her lightly and just picked her up, with very little damage to the skin. Dr. Tien and the others stared blankly. This is a technique that takes many knives to learn. Joe Man cleaned the wound and said, now it's stitching, and there are many kinds of stitches, Western cakes, bring thread. Zibing put a needle on her, and clamped the needle to her with a clip. Joe Man took it, and moved quickly, sewing it up without a trace of stagnation. Dr. Tien and the others opened their mouths. Among the three, only Dr. Xiao had sutured wounds. Both Dr. Tien and Dr. Wei had only heard of it, but had never seen it before. Looking at Joe Man's stitching now, the two of them were stunned. They saw that the big hole was slowly stitched up, and the blood loss was greatly reduced, and the whole leg didn't look so miserable. Joe Man finished the stitches, stood sideways, and said to Zibing, give him the medicine and then bandage him. His legs can't move around, and he still needs to be fixed after the medicine is applied. The biscuits should be down. Dr. Tien wanted to do it himself, so he volunteered and said, sir, I'll come. No, Joe Man said while washing his hands, come out, I'll take a look at your notes. The three of them looked down at the ghost talisman that only they could understand because of their anxiety. See you at 7 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3092. As for the doctor's handwriting, Joe Man can understand it. From childhood to adulthood, from Yazhu to the capital, and then to the palace, except for the imperial doctor in the palace, Kaifang would write correctly, other doctors' handwriting was not correct. But she was still shocked by the words of the three of them. It's not that she hasn't seen scribbled characters, such as Dr. Ding, who sketched it with one hand, but she pondered it for a long time and only recognized it with the help of her apprentice Zhenggu, but at least the sketches were good looking. The words of these three people were not aesthetically pleasing. Joe Man read it seriously for a long time before she even guessed half of it, and she didn't bother to read the remaining half. After returning the small book to them, she stared at them and said, I don't know how much you have memorized, so you can communicate with each other in private, exchange information, or discuss what you don't understand, and then come to me and ask questions. The three of them held the small book tightly. Is there any communication? Just let them copy each other's notes. Joe Manzao found out that the three of them were on guard against each other, which made her very incomprehensible. You are here to learn things and to make progress together, and I didn't let you put yourselves aside. I took out my family, and what I learned from me is what I have learned from each other. So what are you guarding against? Not to mention the love of classmates, at least you should know what is best for each other, right? Joe Man said to them seriously, you don't need to take medicine this afternoon, just review today's trauma treatment and discuss with each other. Seeing that she was leaving, Dr. Tien stopped her quickly. Master Joe, how did you practice the suture? Practiced on anthropomorphic models, the texture and flesh are very real. But Joe Man couldn't say it, so she thought about it and said, do you know pork leg? The three nodded together. Go buy it and practice it, and when you're good at it, you can try it with live livestock. Dr. Tien answered quickly, for example. For example, injured chickens, pigs, and rabbits are fine. Even Dr. Wei couldn't help but say, how come there are so many injured animals in the world? Joe Man, people are often injured, so why aren't livestock injured? Dr. Wei, because they are directly killed and eaten after they are injured. Who would send them out to find a doctor? Joe Man blinked, feeling reasonable. Dr. Tien, we intentionally hurt some. Dr. Xiao, it's not good, it hurts heaven and earth. Everyone looked at Dr. Xiao, and Dr. Tian couldn't help muttering, "It seems that you eat less." Dr. Xiao said embarrassedly, "Eating meat is different from deliberately hurting livestock." Zhou Man felt that what he said was reasonable, and waved his hand, "Okay, I will talk about this later. You should practice the basics first, and when you can sew the pig's legs, I will find a way for you." What can Zhou Manan do? She thought about it for a long time and didn't think of it, so she just didn't want to, and went to see the injured first. A group of people who brought the injured were squatting under the porch. When they saw Zhou Man coming over, they stood up immediately. A half-old child was pulled up by a young man. "Sir, how is my cousin? This is his son, his family is poor, it's the next household, this is the book." Zhou Man flipped through the pages and nodded after confirming that it was him. "Come with me." Zhou Man went through the formalities and wrote a pulse record for them. People need to stay in the hospital for a period of time, and they need someone to take care of them here. You can leave a person and you can go with the bed, but you and the patient are responsible for their own food. The young man asked nervously, "That medicine money?" "The money for the medicine and the consultation fee are paid by our medical office. Unless the medical office for the medicinal materials you need is not available in the medical office, you only need to pay to go to other pharmacies to buy it, but I took a look and found that he currently has all the therapeutic medicinal materials he needs." The young man breathed a sigh of relief, and the villagers surrounding the door also exhaled and whispered, "I really don't want money. I always thought it was a lie. Lao Luo is lucky. Yeah, it's time to catch up. If it was before, this fall would not ruin the family." There was also a smile on the young man's face, and he hurriedly asked, "Sir, will my cousin's leg be okay in the future?" Zhou Man thought for a while and then said, "The bones have been connected, and they will not move around for a while. Look at the subsequent recovery situation. If there is no accident, normal work will be fine, but you must also pay attention in the future, and you should not work too hard. Work, it will take a while." Yes, we must take good care of it." Zhou Man wrote the pulse case, and asked him to sign on it. He couldn't read, so he could only draw the letter. The young man hesitantly pressed his handprint and asked, "What is this?" "This is the proof of living in the medical office. When we look back, we are going to check the accounts of the local medical office." Zhou Man handed him the written prescription, and glanced between him and the half-old child beside him. "Go and ask, who in your family is left to take care of the sick." The young man went out to discuss with his companions, and after a while he came in and said, "I'll stay, just call me when the Lord has instructed me." Zhou Man nodded, and said, "Send the prescription to the pharmacy, they will give you the medicine, whether to eat or apply, they will teach you how to use it, make the medicine yourself, go." The young man nodded again and again, took the prescription, dragged his nephew and went out. As soon as he went out, he was surrounded by people. "I really don't want money. Oh, I really don't want money," what the village chief said could be fake. "Isn't Lao Luo's wife going to give birth? Then you say, do you need money to have a child here?" "No money." Zhou Man in the room heard the question and rushed out of the room quickly, so scared that Zhu Yan's face turned pale. Zhou Man stood under the porch and looked at them with a smile, saying, "In the doctor's office doesn't need money to give birth to a child. Not only the lower households don't need money, but the middle households also don't need money." Zhu Lan stared. This was completely changed by the lady herself. But she is the biggest official of the medical department, who can oppose her? Everyone got excited when they heard it, and one of the men couldn't help but step forward and said, "Sir, did you send it when you were about to give birth, or did you send it after you activated it?" Zhou Man thought about it and then said, "Pregnant women should also check the fetal position frequently. If there is a pregnant woman at home, you can send it to me to have a look. I can roughly estimate the day she will give birth, and when it is approaching, it will be a day or two in advance." "That's good. If it's already activated, It's best to ask Granny when nearby, and she will send it when she can't deliver the baby. She said, you can't hold back when you have a baby. The villagers nodded after being taught, and then whispered, my daughter is about to give birth. This is a female doctor, and she is definitely better than Granny Wen. Joe Man listened to their discussion with a smile, and waited until their backs disappeared around the corner, then turned to look at Julan with bright eyes. Don't worry, the shoes I'm wearing today are specially made by my mother, and they're not slippery at all. Julan patted her chest and said, then you are too scary, don't be so excited next time. See you at 10 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3093. Joe Man supported his waist back home, and Bai Shan also came back from the county office. Seeing her smiling face, he asked, is there anything good? Joe Man withdrew the smile on his face. No, everyone was injured, so what's the good thing? Bai Shan just stared at her. Joe Man was holding back, but after washing up and leaning on the bed, she still didn't hold back and said to him, several people today asked if they could send the pregnant woman to the hospital for delivery, and I agreed to them. Bai Shan, how many people are there? Joe Man, 2 people. Bai Shan held back his smile and asked, do you want to deliver the baby? Joe Man touched his stomach and said, because there is no contraceptive drug, women are very easy to get pregnant, but the survival rate of children is very low. Although our medical department has preached a few times, people who come to the class can listen to it again. There are not many people who go in. There is a long way to go. If they want to listen and understand, we must at least come up with some skills. And starting directly from delivery can also minimize the mortality rate of children. Although many people become parents or even grandparents, they will not raise children. Bai Shan, who has read a lot of parenting books recently, blinked, those books you showed me. Joe Man glanced at him and said, it's not in the bookstore. Bai Shan thought thoughtfully, I see, it would still be a bit awkward for others to see, but after rewriting the words and revising the sentences, they can be sold in the bookstore. Joe Man urged him, come and write, I've been too busy recently, and I have to write a medical book. I really don't have time. Bai Shan is also busy, but he still nodded, I will summarize some applicable ones, and then hand them over to the Princess Bookstore for engraving. But how many people are literate in this world? Most ordinary people in the world are illiterate, and their access to information is more from their elders, Lijhan, and the county government. Bai Shan waited and said, this seems to be the responsibility of your medical department. Joe Man, oh, population growth is also the responsibility of the county government, let's work together. She gave him a silly smile, and reached out to massage his shoulders. I have something else to tell you. I told someone that when a pregnant woman comes to the doctor's office to give birth to a child, not only does she not need money for the registration, but also the middle household does not money, but all expenses must be borne by the medical office, which is somewhat difficult, so you see, should your county government share half of it with us? Bai Shan. Joe Man hurriedly said, this is a major event of population growth, and it is also your merit. Bai Shan rubbed his forehead and said, I can share a part for you, but other county magistrates, will the magistrate agree to share it with the medical department? Why don't you agree? Joe Man said, wait 2 years after the data comes out, if the death rate of children really declines, the population really increases, and the performance is solid, can the magistrates of other counties refuse it? When Bai Shan thought it was true, he couldn't help giving her a thumbs up. I finally know why His Majesty is willing to put us together, because this is the first time it's difficult. Without data and achievements, the first county to do this must only see the effort, but not the gains, and it will be difficult to persevere. However, with population growth, it is very common for young children to die. There is no data at all for 2 to 3 years. In fact, the data that is more reliable should be the data after 6 years. Children are only safe after they are 5 years old. Son. Apart from him, who else would be willing to take out so much money from the county government to toss with the medical department at will? Joe Man squeezed his shoulder and smiled. This official thanked magistrate Bai in advance. You're welcome. Joe Man was about to speak, but with a sudden hiss, he pressed his leg. Bai Shan immediately became nervous and stretched out his hand to help her press her leg. Have a cramp? Have you been standing for a long time today? Joe Man thought that he did stand for a long time today to deal with the wound and suture, so he nodded. Bai Shan frowned, massaged her for relief, and said, hasn't the capital transferred someone for you? You are getting more and more serious, and you will open another medical office next year. The tendon slowly stretched out. Joe Man stretched his legs comfortably on the bed and let Bai Shan continue to press. She hummed. Xiao Yuanzhang said that there is a shortage of manpower everywhere, and the same is true in Beijing. The agency teamed up with the medical offices of Yangzhou and Yangzhou in the capital to vaccinate ordinary people in both places, and children between the ages of 8 and 16 were included in the vaccination. She said, it is said that the third-level students in the Imperial Physician's office have been dispatched to help, and there is no way to recruit people. Otherwise, she would not have kidnapped Dr. Tian with Mr. Qian and they came in as apprentices. Bai Shan pressed her other leg and asked, Dr. Tian, do they use it well? It doesn't go well, Joe Man said. Although they are apprentices of the medical department, they are still rushing to return to the old club, and they will not stay in the medical department for a long time. Although they have done everything I asked them to do, but, the heart is in Cao Ying, or in Han Ying, the difference is still very big. Bai Shan said distressedly, how about I give you a sum of money, and you pay a lot of money to invite 2 more powerful doctors to sit in the hall? Joe Man shook his head, no way, not to mention that I have a lot of money. Can other medical offices learn from me? Even if I make a lot of money, it's hard to get people now. Unless it's a traveler's Langzhong, the folk doctors either have their own pharmacies or are cultivated by other pharmacies since childhood. Raised from an apprentice all the way, unless there is an irreconcilable conflict with the owner, the doctor will generally not leave the pharmacy where he has been since childhood. Bai Shan expressed doubts. Can't the doctor travel and study? Of course you can, but you rarely change employers, Joe Man said. For example, if I was an apprentice in Ji Shitang when I was in Yizhu, I would go on a trip after completing my studies. If it is sitting in the hall, then you must choose Ji Shitang. If you choose another pharmacy to place the order, it will not only be bad for my reputation, but Ji Shitang and I will turn against each other. This kind of taboo was gradually discovered by her when she grew up, but now, she is not an apprentice of Ji Shitang, and has always been in a cooperative relationship with Ji Shitang, but because of this cooperative relationship, she sits in Ji Shitang, and they all have a cooperative relationship. The relationship is naturally closer than other pharmacies. When Joe Man wanted to sell a prescription, the first thing she looked for was Ji Shitang. Only when Ji Shitang offered a price that did not suit her will, she would go to another pharmacy. And Ji Shitang will naturally get close to her and give her some help within her capacity. This is the default unspoken rule in the industry, and the pharmacy and the doctor are mutually beneficial. Joe Man has posted the recruitment list on the bulletin board for so long, and even if no one is recruited, he can know the situation of doctors in Qingzhou and even Leizhou. She can't find anyone at the moment. But Joe Man was not discouraged. She said, we can't dig a doctor with a lot of money, we can use medical skills to catch apprentices. Dr. Tian and the 3 of them don't use it well, so let's catch a few more apprentices, except for 3 a day. Outside the meal, there is basically no expenditure, and I can still afford it. Bai Shan couldn't help but exerted his strength and said happily, you are really a fox. Joe Man was not convinced. I'm honest. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3094. When Man Bao went to the hospital the next day, he saw Lao Luo's wife. She had a belly bigger than Zhou Man, and she was carrying a bag. The person who sent her said, "We went out yesterday afternoon, I walked slowly on the road, I spent a night outside, and I arrived at this time in a hurry after dawn. How is Lao Luo?" "Haven't you met anyone who came back on your way?" the young man said. The man was rescued, but his leg was broken, and he said he needed to live for a while. As he spoke, the young man saw Zhou Man, who had entered the door, and immediately said, "Sister-in-law, this is Mr. Zhou. I will treat Brother Hall's injury without paying for medicine." As soon as the pregnant woman heard it, before she could see the person clearly, she knelt down and kowtowed. Zhou Man was startled, and quickly asked Julan to support her. "You don't have to. You're heavy, but don't move your fetus." Only then did the lady of the Luo family find out that Zhou Man was actually a woman, and she was also pregnant. Her eyes widened in surprise. Why is she a female doctor?" Julan said, "What's wrong with the female doctor? Our lady is an imperial doctor from the imperial hospital." Zhou Man looked at her belly curiously and asked, "How many months have you been?" Because Zhou Man was also pregnant, the wife of the Luo family only listened to the usual words at the time, and immediately laughed. "It's been more than 9 months, and my wife's belly is small, so it's not long since I was pregnant, right?" Zhou Man smiled and said, "It's been almost 6 months. The lady of the Luo family was taken aback and looked at her belly. "It looks a little small." Zhou Man knew that his condition was normal, so he waved his hand indifferently and said, "This is my first child, and I'm not pregnant, but it's normal. Since you're here, I'll check it out for you." The wife of the Luo family followed Zhou Man into the house to check in a daze, and felt the pulse. Zhou Man asked her about her pregnancy and reached out to feel the fetal position. After the inspection, Zhou Man then said, "I'll ask someone to prepare a room for you to live in." The lady of the Luo family immediately said, "Doctor, my belly is big, and my man hurt his leg again, so I can't take care of him. I'll come to see him today, and I'll be leaving in a while." She took out a money bag and wanted to give it to Zhou Man, but she was afraid that she would dislike her, so she could only stretch it out cautiously and said, "I have heard from my uncle that you are free of medicines here, but you can't let the doctor work for nothing." When Zhou Man saw this money bag, a flash of lightning flashed in his mind, a red envelope. She was a little funny, pushed the money bag back, and said, "I'm not busy working in vain. I took the salary of the court. If you want to thank the court and your majesty, thank the court and your majesty in your heart. If you can publicize our medical department, let us the more sick people come to the hospital, the better." The wife of the Luo family was not sure if what she said was true or not, and wanted to push back. Zhou Man had already changed the subject and said, "If I'm not wrong, judging from your pulse and pregnancy date, you might give birth in the next 2 days. Now, rather than risk going home at this time, it's better to stay in the hospital and give birth." The wife of the Luo family was stunned. Am I going to give birth?" Zhou Man nodded. "Emotions and fatigue may lead to premature delivery, but you are not premature. It is 9 months and 18 days, and the delivery is normal at this time, so stay." But she is not familiar with it here. She is about to give birth, and she wants to go back to a place she is familiar with. Seeing that she was a little anxious, Zhou Man softly comforted her and said, "Isn't your husband here? I think there are several women among the people who brought you here today. You leave a familiar one to take care of you, and wait for the day of delivery. I can deliver your baby, as well as Mother Wen, which is much safer than giving birth at home." "Lady Luo, this." Zhou Man seemed to know what she wanted to ask, and said, "We don't need money for birth delivery, nor do we need money for accommodation. You only need to be responsible for your own food and drink." The lady of the Luo family was silent. She went out to discuss with others, and finally decided to stay. Zhou Man immediately asked people to invite all the mothers from Bihai County to hold a small meeting in a room. "You and I are no strangers. I won't be around the corner, and I will talk straight to the point. There are not many women in Lujiang County, there are only 5 in total. After the owner has invited the Western family, the business is not bad, and occasionally they go to the countryside to pick up business. In addition to delivering babies, Granny Wen will also touch the fetus, and they will even deal with the methods of raising the fetus and some problems encountered after delivery. Of course, whether it is correct or not is not to be said. Anyway, the effect that everyone sees in the end is positive. Although the world does not admit it, Zhou Man just thinks that Po Wen is equivalent to half a doctor. In some aspects, their experience is no worse than that of a doctor, and their handling methods are also better than that of a doctor. Therefore, when Zhou Man received a large number of female patients, he invited these women to meet, teach them some ways to deal with the disease, and learn from them about fertility and women's health in Bihai County. They know more comprehensively than the government. Zhou Mandao, during production, techniques, acupuncture, and medicines are all useful, especially for production techniques. I know that you all have the ability to look after your own house, and I don't want yours. I just want to teach some birth delivery skills that I know. You guys might be able to use it in the future. In a word, I will give you free training. Do you want to learn?" Of course women want to learn, so the medical department has women, free of charge. After all, how well you learn still has to be practiced, and the mothers in the medical department practice it for them. Zhou Man took the 5 women went to see the lady of the Luo family, and said to her, "Look, this is the woman when cooperated with our medical department. They are all famous women in Bihai County, can you rest assured?" The wife of the Luo family only thinks that Zhou Man is too enthusiastic. Isn't it an old saying that no pie will fall from the sky? So Zhou Man has stepped aside. "I'll ask them to touch the fetal position for you. Come, relax." The lady of the Luo family was not at all relaxed. She swallowed nervously and asked, "Doctor, am I having a bad pregnancy?" Zhou Man comforted her, "Don't be afraid, there are so many stable mothers here. Worry more, okay?" The 5 stable mothers all touched her stomach, asked some more questions, and then went to the yard to talk. The Luo family's wife's heart was pounding, and she quickly looked at the woman next to her. "Auntie, I'll go take a look." She immediately slipped out to eavesdrop. Zhou Man asked them, "Have you touched it?" The 5 women looked at each other, and one of them said, "The fetal position is a bit wrong, it's crooked, but it's not a big problem. It can be adjusted during production." The other frowned and said, "I felt it, and the fetuses looked a bit like twins." As soon as she exited, the other 4 didn't dare to speak. She was considered the most powerful woman in Bihai County. No one. Even though she is only 40 years old, she has delivered quite a few children, and there are few accidents. She is the best stable mother in Bihai County. The Song family, Zhao family, the former county magistrate's family, and even Qingzhou have big families. Come and invite her. Zhou Man glanced at the others, nodded slightly, and confirmed her conclusion, "Yes, it's twins." See you at 8 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3095. The wives widened their eyes in surprise and glanced at each other. If there are twins, it will be much more dangerous. Zhou Man looked at Wang Wenpo, the most powerful woman. "What do you think?" Wang Wenpo also felt dangerous. "The child is even more dangerous. I think her belly is big, but it is not big in terms of twins. As long as the fetus is in a correct position and has enough strength, She should be able to give birth safely, but such a child I am afraid that I will not be able to support myself when I am born. Generally, it's not easy to support newborn children, let alone twins. Joe Man nodded and asked, what can you do for the right fetal position? This, it can only be right when it's time to give birth. She's already this month, so it's not right. Yeah, the action is bigger, what if she is urged to give birth earlier? Joe Man then said, I have 3 methods for correcting the fetal position, 1 movement technique, 1 technique, and 1 needle technique. Do you want to learn it? Also, how many of you can figure out twins? Everyone looked at each other in dismay, and in the end, only Wang Wenpo came out. Joe Man said, then let's teach you to touch the tire first. She said, you don't know how to diagnose the pulse, but in fact, an experienced woman can also find out the number of babies by means of techniques. Except for Wang Wenpo, the other women's eyes lit up, and they were faintly excited. Po Wang Wen lowered her eyes and didn't say a word, but she quickly raised a smile, I just touched it vaguely, not necessarily accurate. Joe Man smiled at her and said, then consolidate it this time. Aunt Luo retracted, ran into the house and told the Luo family's wife, the doctor and the women said that you are pregnant with twins. She widened her eyes, what? It also said that the fetal position is a little wrong, and I want to give you the correct fetal position. The wife of the Luo family was a little anxious, why are twins? My family has never had twins, Auntie, I won't die. No, don't scare yourself, that's what the female doctor said, it's not too serious, you can give birth safely, but the child may not be able to support yourself. Aunt Luo said this for a while and lowered her voice said, your family has never had twins, but your mother-in-law has. The wife of the Luo family was stunned, my mother-in-law gave birth to twins. It was born before Dallin, but it's not easy to raise. One died after 3 days of birth, and the other died after half a year old. Before your family's Dallin, your parents-in-law gave birth. As for the 4 children, they just haven't raised them. The lady of the Luo family thought of her 2 children who died in her early years and did not speak. Seeing her bowing her head, Aunt Luo comforted her in a low voice, don't worry, you already have children and daughters, it's okay if this couple can't stand, the most important thing is that you have to live. She said bluntly, Dallin has broken his leg now. If you have another accident, who will the 3 children in the family rely on? You can't have an accident for the sake of the 3 children, so you can rest assured and give birth here. The lady of the Luo family touched her stomach and said nothing. Aunt Luo continued, Sanlang has already inquired about it. This lord from the medical office is an imperial doctor from the capital. He used to treat the emperor and empress. He is very old. You will definitely save your life by giving birth here, and it will not cost you money. She sighed, it's really a good time. If this is born in the village, it's really dangerous to have twins, and the village is remote, so it's really difficult to hire a doctor. The lady of the Luo family finally regained her senses, and said with red eyes, I know, but I feel uncomfortable all of a sudden. This is what I was carrying in my pregnancy in October, and I said it was going to die. When Joe Man brought people in, the wife of the Luo family was wiping her tears down. Joe Man quickly asked, what's wrong? But you're not feeling well. The lady of the Luo family shook her head, no, doctor, no, my lord, I've heard it all. I know whatever, I'll have a baby here. If I don't leave, I'll trouble you in the future. Joe Man was stunned for a moment and nodded, but he always felt weird, then, why are you crying? The lady of the Luo family hugged her stomach and said, I can't bear it. As soon as the words fell, she burst into tears, Sir, I have died of 2 children before, do you think these 2 children were reincarnated from the first 2? Why can't I keep them? Joe Man, it hasn't been born yet, how do you know that it can't be raised? The lady of the Luo family said with red eyes, "Didn't you say you can't keep it up?" Zhou Man immediately denied, "No, I didn't say it." She said with a serious face, "Although twin children are difficult to raise, they are only difficult to raise. They haven't given birth yet. I haven't seen the child's physical condition. How can you say they can't raise them?" The wife of the Luo family looked at Aunt Luo. Aunt Luo immediately slapped her face and said, "Oh, that's what I didn't say clearly, niece-in-law, don't take it to heart, you should take care of yourself first and give birth to the child, then we will take good care of it, and we will definitely be able to support it." But she didn't find it easy. Zhou Man saw that her mood was slowly calming down, so the 5 people came forward to see her feel the fetus. Zhou Manbian pointed them out bit by bit how to figure out that they were twins. Actually, it's best to look at it with the pulse, that's the most accurate. But the stable women won't listen to the pulse. Although you can hear the pounding pulse when you put your fingers on your hands, it is really difficult to learn to distinguish. Zhou Man also knew that it was difficult to learn. Even doctors who diagnose the pulse all year round were rarely able to diagnose twins, so Zhou Man did not force them. After teaching for a long time, Zibing came to look for her. "Ma'am, there are several female patients in front of them, and they don't want to let Dr. Tian see them." Zhou Man nodded to several people, "You can think about it again, I'll come over later to teach you the correct fetal position." Zhou Man went to the front yard to see, and the woman who came to seek medical treatment was standing in the corridor looking around, and he was relieved to see her. Zhou Man entered the clinic and beckoned them in. It is not easy to correct the fetal position, but it is actually not difficult. In Zhou Man's words, the child is moving in the stomach. When he kicks, and turns over, the person is turned upside down, but the older the month, the more difficult it is to correct the fetal position. This is because the fetus is too big, and he can't move in it. If he doesn't move around in a regular way, it is easy to be wrapped around the neck by the umbilical cord, so you should be especially careful when you are in the correct fetal position, especially when the month is old. Zhou Man instructed the lady of the Luo family to change positions and gently massaged her stomach. After a long time, the child in her stomach seemed to wake up, and she was also interested in playing with her, so she kicked her stomach. Zhou Man took the eldest effort to finally move the fetal position a little bit, and the wives immediately stepped forward to touch them, and after a while their eyes lit up. "It's a lot straighter, although it's not directly facing the cervix, but this is a twin, and excusable. It's much easier to produce that way." The lady of the Luo family breathed a sigh of relief when she heard their words. See you at 11 o'clock. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3096. Zhou Man was very happy when he returned to the county government office. With Mrs. Wen, she could call them directly in the future, at least until they finished their studies, it was free. The mother-in-laws were also happy when they left home. They were naturally happy to have learned so much for nothing. In the future, they would be more confident when they visited the house again, and they could also see some symptoms before and after childbirth. Zhou Man felt that the wife of the Luo family should have a few more days to give birth, but I don't know if she was frightened and walked a long way in the past 2 days. In the early morning, Xiao Cao ran to the backyard of the county government and knocked on the door, anxious. The opposite doorman said, "The medical department Li Luo's wife has launched." Zhou Man heard the movement and quickly got up to go out. Zheng Shi was also alarmed, and quickly came out to see, "You are pregnant yourself. Don't get tired when this time passes." Bai Shan was also dressed, took the cloak from Mei, wrapped Zhou Man, and said, "Don't worry, mother, I will accompany her there." Mrs. Jian rushed over and asked, "Would you like us to go over and have a look?" Zheng Shi nodded again and looked at Zhou Man. "No need," Zhou Man said, "they must have called Granny Wen. There's Dr. Wei over there. Enough is enough." Sister-in-law, you and your mother should go to rest. It's still a while before dawn, so don't catch a cold. Bai Shan hugged Zhou Man to go to the medical office. Daji simply set up a car for them, and drove directly over, which was faster, and prevented them from walking around in the cold wind. When we arrived at the hospital, the backyard was already lively. This is the first mother to give birth in the medical department. Mrs. Xiao is heating hot water in the kitchen, and Dr. Wei is guarding outside the delivery room and is asking people to prepare various things. Even Hu's mother came out and was accompanying the mother in the house. As soon as Zhou Man went in, he saw Aunt Luo and Mother Hu standing by the bed, and the wife of the Luo family was lying on the bed with an uncomfortable look. Zhou Man stepped forward to look at it, nodded and said, "I'm about to give birth, have you called the stable mothers?" Dr. Wei said outside, Hu Dalin and the others went to call. There are a lot of people living in the hospital, so there are plenty of people. Zhou Man responded, felt the pulse of the lady of the Luo family, and said to her, "Very good, don't be afraid, everything is going well now, let her sit higher." Zhou Man instructed Aunt Luo to help the wife of the Luo family lie down, and the 5 stable mothers quickly arrived. Wang Wenpo has the best skills and has a lot of experience, and even said, "You have to wait, don't be afraid, it's not the first time to give birth, and the cervix will open faster if you relax." The Luo family's wife forced a smile and said, "Although I have given birth to many children, this is the first time I have given birth to twins." Zhou Man reassured her, "Don't be afraid, the twins are still relatively young. I touched the fetal position and it didn't change much. I can give you a touch to relieve the pain in a while." Zhou Man gave the 5 people a wink and asked them to watch for a while. The stable women received winks and nodded to show their understanding. Zhou Man pressed the acupuncture points on her body, which quickly relieved her pain, and at the same time allowed her to gradually relax. When the ladies saw it, they immediately praised the lady of the Luo family, "Yes, that's it, relax first." The lady of the Luo family listened, more confident and more relaxed. With 5 stable mothers and Zhou Man, it is not the first time for the mother to give birth. Even if she has twins and the fetal position is slightly inclined, she will give birth quickly and smoothly. As soon as the first child was born, a mother-in-law took the child, immediately took out her mouth, and patted her upside down to make sure that she was crying and that she was alive, and then cleaned it and handed it over after wrapping it up to Zhou Man. Zhou Man checked the child, it was very small, but fortunately it looked strong. Her younger brother was also born soon and looked a little smaller than her. Zhou Man checked it and put it aside, thinking about it. Dr. Wei especially wanted to take a look at the children, as twin children have always been difficult to support. There are many women, and the speed of processing is also fast, and the mother was quickly cleaned up. Seeing that the mother closed her eyes and opened them quickly, Wang Wen smiled and said, "How is it, do you still have energy? There are 5 of us. Here, Lord Zhou is here again, what are you afraid of?" The Luo family's wife forced a smile and asked, "How is the child?" Wang Wenpo looked at Zhou Man. Zhou Man and a mother-in-law held the child to her and said, "A girl, a boy, the girl is my sister." She said, "Because they are twins, they are both weak, but it doesn't seem to be a problem now, you should rest first, and see if you can produce milk after dawn, and feed it first, if not, I will prescribe medicine for you, after you eat it if you feed them again, they are equivalent to taking medicine." The 2 children were placed by the mother's side for her to see, and the Luo family's wife breathed a sigh of relief. Bai Shan sat outside with Dr. Wei in a daze. When he saw Zhou Man coming out, he got up faster than Dr. Wei to meet him. "How is it?" Zhou Man said, "Mother and son are safe." Bai Shan couldn't help laughing, stretched out his hand to hold hers. "That's good, are you frightened?" He whispered, "I just heard Dr. Wei say that it is best for pregnant women not to watch others give birth." So as not to be afraid, Zhou Man said, Don't worry, I won't be afraid. She has even done cesarean section, what is there to be afraid of? Bai Shan thought so too, so he exhaled his last breath and supported her. Are you going back then? Zhou Man glanced at the sky and felt that he could sleep for an hour after returning, so he nodded. She turned her head and said to the 5 women, you can think about the method I used just now. If you have any doubts, you can discuss it with each other. If you are still puzzled, ask me again. He said to Dr. Wei again, let's go first, there is Dr. Lo on the side of the medical office. Then ask Aunt Luo to contact Dr. Wei if she has something to do. Dr. Wei hesitated several times, but Bai Shan kept supporting Zhou Man. He couldn't speak a few times, and could only watch them leave. It wasn't until the next day that he had the opportunity to ask, my lord, how are the twins? Zhou Mandao, it's a little weak, so depending on the situation in the past few days, if you eat well and grow well, maybe you can make up for the deficiencies in the tire. The period of time when the newborn is born is the fastest growing period and the easiest to supplement nutrition. So Zhou Man valued breast milk very much. Seeing that Dr. Wei was interested, she simply took him to see the maternity and asked him to take the pulse of the Luo family's wife. Dr. Wei can't see anything. Isn't this pulse condition all the women who have just given birth? It is normal to be weak and weak. Zhou Man asked the wife of the Luo family, is there any milk? The lady of the Luo family said, I feel it, but it hasn't come out yet. The child just took a breath, but it didn't come out. In fact, she was also a little anxious. Seeing that she was nervous, Zhou Man comforted her and said, don't be nervous, I've already had someone make a milk soup for you, you can drink a little later, don't worry, milk will come out, you have given birth to several children, and you can still no milk. The lady of the Luo family also relaxed when she thought about it. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3097. MRSGN went to the street to buy fish, added some medicine bags that Zhou Man sent back, made soup, and sent it to the medical office together with MRS Zheng. Because Zhou Man was pregnant, the two were very interested in the child at this time, not to mention that it was a twin. Little Qian carefully looked at the child on the bed and sighed, it's really small. MRS Zheng also nodded, not daring to disturb the mother too much, and withdrew with MRS Jian. She is not very experienced, so looking at Zhou Man's belly, she can't help but worry, do you think Man Bao's belly is too small? Xiao Jian said with experience, it's not too small, the first child is not too big, I think it is just right. Zheng Shi was relieved. After looking around the medical office, she couldn't help but ask, this medical office has accepted so many stable wives? Will there be many mothers coming here to give birth in the future? Zhou Mandao, I hope, but they are here to learn. I actually want more people to come and learn about pregnancy and child rearing. If you want to keep Granny Wen later, you will have to spend money. However, their doctor will also deliver the baby, just because they are afraid that the mothers will not be willing to let the doctor from the medical office deliver the baby. After all, not every medical office happens to have female doctors. The wife of the Luo family drank the soup, and soon gave up milk. The two children sucked hard and sucked it out, sweating profusely. Seeing that it was useful, Zhou Man felt the pulse of the wife of the Luo family, grabbed 2 small medicine packets for her, and handed them to Aunt Luo. When the soup is boiled, put it in and boil it together, this is milk and strong. Medicine bag. Aunt Luo took it in a daze, and asked, this, what are you cooking, is it also fish soup? Zhou Mandao, chicken soup and bone soup are fine. You can cook whatever the mother likes to eat. The wife of the Luo family is not picky at all, She thinks it is good to have meat. She was a little restless after just one meal. She came to see her husband, but she stayed there too, and she ate fish and meat at every meal. In less than half a month, she ate all the money she brought. The wife of the Luo family wanted to cry, so Lao Luo comforted her. I have asked Saburo to go back to get the money, don't cry, but the adults said, you will have no milk if you cry. The wife of the Luo family could only hold back, but couldn't help sobbing, if mother-in-law knew that I ate all the money. Lao Luo said indifferently, you didn't eat it alone. I'm not allowed to eat here? Besides, Saburo and Auntie are here to take care of us. You can't let people go to work, and let people eat out of their own pockets, right? The lady of the Luo family asked, when are we going home? Why don't we go home and keep it? Lao Luo didn't want to go back. He reached out and touched his leg, lowered his eyes and said, wait a minute, the Lord said that my bones are growing, and I have to take medicine recently. And the child will have to be raised again, and I will go back. Can you keep it like this? The wife of the Luo family turned to look at the pair of children next to her. It was only half a month ago that the two children had changed a lot. Not only had they grown up a lot, but their eyebrows and eyes had also opened up a little, and their spirits were also improved. It's not like a twin, it's like a single born at full term. She is the mother, and I feel the deepest feeling, perhaps because of the good food, or because of the medicine package prescribed by the medical department. Her milk is very good and the amount is sufficient. The more the two children eat, the longer the better. It is also easier to carry than the child in front. The wife of the Luo family stopped talking, and agreed to stay for a while longer as her husband said. As a result, Luo Saburo, who went back, did not bring any money, but brought a group of people over the next day, including her in-laws. When Daji saw so many irrelevant people pouring into the medical office, he couldn't help standing beside Joe Man. Granny Luo had already made up her mind to take the two back no matter what, so she looked fiercely at Joe Man, the three Dr. Tian beside her. She went straight to them, sat on the ground with her buttocks, raised her hand to them and was about to pat her thigh. Joe Man, who was standing beside, suddenly said, you are right or wrong, I am the commander, they are my subordinates. Granny Luo's hand froze in mid-air, holding her breath in her throat, unable to get down or get up. She adjusted it, and she was about to pat it down as soon as she moved her hand. Joe Man suddenly sighed heavily and said, I see, are you here to pick them up from the hospital? Granny Luo sullenly replied, yes, then wiped her eyes with her hands and was about to cry. Joe Man had already nodded and sighed, then take it back, but I have a few words to warn you. Granny Luo's cry was also suppressed, and she couldn't come out for a while. Joe Man looked at the villagers behind Granny Luo, his eyes swept across their faces, and then settled on an old man, saying, Luo Dalan's leg is broken, and his muscles and bones have been broken for 100 days, and he can't use it for at least 100 days. When it comes to the work of the legs, you should walk less, and you must not move your legs for a month. She said, moving, the bones are crooked, the lame is mild, and the inability to stand up is moderate. If the bones inside turn to necrosis, it will be fatal. I hope you can remember, and that is, I will prescribe some plaster for you to go back. During this time, he has also learned how to apply the medicine. It is good to go back and apply the medicine by himself. If you have the conditions, you can come for a follow-up visit once every 2 weeks. It's an account, no money. He added, as for Mrs. Luo, the two children are a little weak because they are twins. After returning home, make sure that she has enough milk. I will give her some strong medicine packs, and stew them with fish, chicken, pigs, and other meats to make them strong. Children, reduce the chance of getting sick and dying. Joe Man waved his hand and said, okay, just settle the money and go. Granny Luo finally found something to say and shouted, didn't you say you don't want money? The cake behind Joe Man said, medicine and consultation fee are not required, but you can't ask for money for the oil, salt, sauce, vinegar, and firewood in the kitchen. Don't worry, we are all calculated on a daily basis. It's easy to pay, just go out and buy firewood, rice, oil, and salt to make up for it. Granny Luo stopped talking immediately. Joe Man said to other villagers, the medical office also delivers children. If someone in your family wants to give birth in the future, you can also send it to the medical office. At present, the lower and middle households do not need money. Someone asked, what about after that? Joe Mandeo, let's see the situation, you can ask before you come, and we will tell you if you receive the money. The wife of the Luo family came out with the child in her arms with pity. Joe Man nodded slightly to her, and said, have you remembered what I taught you in the past half month? The lady of the Luo family nodded again and again, remember, adults can rest assured, I will take good care of the child. Joe Man nodded with satisfaction. Although he has only taught one person, since he has started, will the second one be far behind? The Luo family came to pick them up with an ox cart. The villagers carried Luo Dalan into the car. The wife of the Luo family and Aunt Luo could sit in the car with their children, and they were not tired. After leaving the medical office, someone immediately asked Granny Luo, how much did you go to? See you at 7 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3098. Granny Luo said with a gloomy expression, 60 when. Oh, it took half a month to spend so much money. Don't talk sarcastically, isn't it money that you took 500 when before? Isn't that the money to buy rice and meat? A villager said, if you want me to say that you are lucky, you have met the medical department and met a good official. Look at Jin Erlang's family in the next village. I fell off the mountain and ended up spending $3 in the pharmacy, but in the end I couldn't take it anymore, and it took me half a year to bring it back, and now the orphans and widows owe foreign debts again, that day. That is, although your family spent more than 500 yuan, it still includes the money for your daughter-in-law to give birth to a child. Look at how well these two children are raised. I will send them to the medical office when my family has a child. By the way, Dalan's family, what did that adult preach to you just now? The lady of the Luo family said, teach me how to raise a child. She said, Master Joe said that if a child cries, it is either hot or cold, or hungry, or it is pulled. Everyone laughed, who doesn't know about this? But Lord Joe also said that if these are not the case, it means that the child is uncomfortable. For the past 2 weeks, Joe Man has taught her how to raise a child, how to restore her body, and how to treat any symptoms that a woman has when she is free. Instead of looking for a doctor, they can also find some herbs in the countryside to boil water for bathing, which is said to have the effect of dispelling pathogens and relieving itching. Of course, such words can't be said at the moment. There are so many men. When they go back, they will say it when the women whisper. By the way, Aunt Luo also learned a lot from her. She remembered that her mother-in-law also had many problems, so just go back and talk to her. The two looked at each other and smiled slightly. When the wife of the Luo family returned to the village immediately became lively, with adults and children running out to join in the fun. There is nothing to do in the winter. It is a rare thing to live in the medical office at this time. Whether it is a broken leg and no money for treatment, or the wife of the Luo family going to the county medical office to give birth to a child, or giving birth to twins, that is all. Rare thing. The men all gathered around Luo Dalan, while the women crowded into another room to look at the Luo family's wife and children. You two children are so good looking. I heard people say that the children were very young when they were born. Are you feeding your child by taking medicine every day in the hospital? What's the medical office like? I've always heard people say that the gate is so high and the yard is so big that it really doesn't cost money for medical treatment. I don't want money. What is it like to have a baby at the doctor's office? Is it the same as having a baby at home? This lady of the Luo family doesn't have much say, because although it was her who gave birth to the child, she was so focused on giving birth at the time that she didn't pay attention to what was going on around her. Welcome people. The women listened with relish. Is that official really a woman? Isn't it? That's the imperial doctor from the capital. I heard that it is still some kind of editor. It is very powerful. The official rank is higher than that of our county magistrate. Really? Isn't it said that the county magistrate and the female officer of the medical office are a husband and wife? It's a husband and wife, but Lord Zhou's official is bigger than that of the county magistrate. Is this what their girl said? It's so strange. It's strange enough for a woman to be an official. Her official is even bigger than her husband's. No, but Lord Zhou really knows a lot and has a good heart. When I went out to buy vegetables, I passed by a tea house and heard people inside say that Lord Zhou is the reincarnation of a god in the sky, and I have to go back to the sky in the future. The lady of the Luo family who was sitting on the bed immediately said, yes, yes, I also think Lord Zhou is the reincarnation of an immortal. You don't know, she knows a lot. Auntie, do you remember, it was delivered to Zioa village a few days ago. A child came over with a big belly and a blue face, but he was alive and kicking. We looked at it without a problem, but when we touched it, she said it was a pest, and gave the child a medicine. Oh my God, the child pulled out a lot of worms. I lived in the hospital for 3 days before I left, and when I left, my face was still bad, but it was no longer as blue as it had been at the beginning. If it weren't for the gods, how could she know that there were worms growing in her stomach when she touched it? The lady of the Luo family said. Even Dr. Tian and the others who saw the doctor together couldn't see it. What kind of immortal is that? Let's go back and say goodbye. Mrs. Luo didn't know. Aunt Luo thought about it for a while, and said unsurely, I heard from the people in the tea house, it seems like something is too white. Tabai jinxing, a woman immediately clapped her hands and said, I know, I saw it when I went to the temple to worship last time. She is a very beautiful fairy. Tabai jinxing is an immortal under the Jade Emperor, right? Shouldn't it be in a Taoist temple? I remember it as an old man. Oh, I can still remember it wrong. The statue that the master said at that time was the Tabai fairy, the one who relieves misfortune and manages diseases. If you worship it, you will be free from illness and disaster. It should be a god in the Taoist temple. The two of them quarreled, and someone immediately settled the situation. Oh, don't quarrel, don't care who it is, the reincarnated immortal is in our county, it is better to worship the deity than to worship the statue. It makes sense. But the county town is too far away. It takes a day to go back and forth. It's too much trouble for a god to worship you. How can she bless you with such a dishonest heart? Yes, yes, I'm not too troublesome, I'll go to worship after a while. Zhou Man's original intention was to ask Mrs. Luo and Aunt Luo to promote the medical department for her and help popularize the treatment methods for some common diseases of women. Unexpectedly, before Mrs. Luo had time to mention it, everyone's topic was about gods. So a few days later, when Zhou Man went to the medical office, he happened to meet a woman with 2 children, a basket in her hand, and when she arrived at the door of the medical office, she led the children to kneel. Zhou Man was startled and stopped when he got out of the car. Bai Erlang was also stunned, and hurriedly stuffed her back into the car, fearing that there would be a conflict. Wait a minute, let someone ask. You get in the car first and then ask someone to ask. You have 2 bodies now, so be careful. Mingda stuck his head out and asked, what's wrong? In the end, the 2 got out of the car, but instead of stepping forward, they stood aside to watch, and Julan went up to ask a questionable maid with an amiable appearance. But seeing the woman taking out the incense from the basket, lighting it and bowing, she found a brick and inserted it in the crack, and then she clapped her hands together and said something. Seeing that she was so pious, Julan, who came forward, didn't want to disturb her, so she could only ask after she had finished her worship, "Sister-in-law, what are you doing?" The woman looked up at Julan, pulled the two children up, and said, "Worship the gods, little lady, you should pay attention when you pass by here, don't trample my incense, this is for the gods to eat." Julan stared, and the palace maid couldn't help but ask, "Want to ask which goddess my sister-in-law worships? I forgot the time to eat melon, see you at 11 o'clock in the evening."